Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and I'm back for another important conversation that I think you guys are going to enjoy. Today I'm talking with my friend Kenny, who I think has been on this channel before. You've probably seen him, if not on the channel in person, or for those who've paid attention to the People's Reset, formerly the Greater Reset, you've seen Kenny speak and participate in that. So we'll talk more about some of the different things you're involved in today, but how are you doing so far?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's a beautiful rainy day here in the Northwest, but it's my last day in the rain, and then traveling for the rest of the month until I end up with you in Mexico in 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the People's Reset today as well, but I think we've got some different topics that are all sort of interconnected to cover today. And we're going to start first by talking about an activist, a programmer. He was an entrepreneur. I think he was just a really good guy. I didn't know him personally. I don't know if you did, Kenny, or really most of us probably didn't, but looking back, we could see how important his work is. And we're talking, of course, about Aaron Swartz. His anniversary of his death is coming up shortly, January 11th, 2013. It happened then. And for those who don't know about his story, I encourage you to learn more. Kenny, do you remember the name of the documentary that they put out about his life and his death?
The Internet's Own Boy.
Yeah,
was
exactly.
the documentary. Really good. And then there's a couple books as well. The Idealist and maybe a book called The Internet's Own Boy as well. There's a couple really good books about him as well that include lots of his writings from forums and stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out The Internet's Own Boy. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's a really powerful documentary. But since we are talking about somebody who passed away almost, that'll be 12 years now, I'm guarantee there's people in this audience who probably have just kind of joined the freedom movement, so to speak, in the last couple of years, who might not even be aware of Aaron Swartz or his untimely death. And there's various conspiracies around that, but maybe you could just lay out a little bit about the importance of Aaron, his work, and what he stood for.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, to put it lightly, or simply, he was a liberty activist. He was very interested in freedom of information. He was considered a tech genius. He was definitely a whiz kid. He was involved in a few different projects early on. I forget what is exactly. It's a bunch, like, I want to say, like, Creative Commons. Like, I mean, he's like heavily
Creative
involved.
Commons was one of the big ones for sure.
Yeah. There's a handful of different things that we all just kind of take for granted, or maybe if you're not very techy, you haven't even heard of, but you are using them regularly, that he was heavily involved in before he really, or as he was getting bigger, and then he became progressively more and more radical, I guess you could say. And he was the big thing was what was the name of the document? The open access, the Guerrilla Open Access Manifesto, right? I think is what it is. Basically, a manifesto for the idea of open internet, open information, like open sourcing everything, like getting it out there. Yeah, he published that in 2008. And that was kind of the beginning of him getting in trouble, right? That was the beginning of him being a target, let's say. And from there,
if I remember correctly, I mean, so he was a student or was involved at MIT, right?
Yeah.
And so he was trying, one of the things, like you said, there's a number of things he was involved in, but one of the things was trying to get open access specifically for like research papers, right? And for peer-reviewed journals, which for those who haven't gone down that rabbit hole is just another form of information control that the state and their partners use to keep people from being able to readily access studies, databases, et cetera. You guys have ever tried to look up a study? I'm sure you hit a paywall at some point, or you got to be a member of this thing. Thankfully, there are new projects that have come out that have helped with that. And I would say those are largely inspired by Aaron. But that, I remember being a big part of his thing, is just thinking that information should be available to the people. And just encourage people to check out the documentary if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts. But I do remember that being a really important piece of what he was trying to do, was to set information free.
Yeah, yeah. What he actually ended up, like the charges he got and everything were around that. He used the MIT access there on site to basically download, I want to say it's like hundreds of thousands of like journal papers and stuff, things that are, like a small version of classified. Like they just tuck them away, and they're gated off unless you have the right letters or enough money to pay for them. And he just downloaded this stuff and then was putting it up for people to access publicly for free.
And so he was charged with some, I don't remember the exact charges, but that's, like you said, that's what kind of set off the whole case against him. He ends up being arrested. And this guy, I mean, you can look at, if anybody, again, go watch the documentary, but look up videos of Aaron. He clearly was not like he seemed to be kind of like a quiet, timid, sort of brilliant guy. He wasn't necessarily somebody who's used to that kind of attention, and definitely negative attention coming his way. And the story goes that he ended up killing himself. Like I said, there's conspiracies and whatnot around that, but setting those aside for the moment, what happened to him was a travesty, and obviously the world lost a brilliant mind and somebody who could and was doing good and could have done a lot more good. I can only imagine like what he would be up to now in the age of, everything we've seen now. And just as in some ways the internet has become more free, or tools at least are available for those who want to use them, I can only imagine, what sort of things he'd be doing. I mentioned that like there are projects that have been inspired by him. I'm sure you're familiar, Kenny, but for those who aren't, there are websites like Sci-Hub that now exist, which allow people to break paywalls and to get into peer-reviewed journals. And like I said, scientific studies that previously have been locked up. And that was one of the big things Aaron was fighting for. And so now there are, part of his legacy, I think, is that there are projects like that do exist and allow for that a little bit more free flow of information than there has been in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. You can get a browser plugin for Brave that'll help you. I forget the name of it. It rotates every couple of years as they, catch on. But yeah, you can start to get past that stuff. And that's really the kind of the moral of so many of these stories, is like, we just have to find a way around when they put up walls. And yeah, it's crazy. I know Aaron, he was just facing such crazy charges for it because they were counting like every separate document that he had downloaded and shared as a different charge. And so he was facing, the rest of his life. So if he did take his own life, it's certainly pretty easy to understand where that might have come from. And obviously there's plenty of reason for them to remove people, as we've seen them do to journalists and whistleblowers and many others.
Yeah, it's definitely a sad story. I remember the first time I watched it. It's been years now since I watched the documentary, and I hadn't previously even heard of Aaron, when he was alive. I wish I had. And it was just mind-blowing because they interview like his ex-girlfriend, they interview friends and people, obviously family members, people who knew him. And he did seem to be just another bright-minded, kind-hearted soul who was here and wanted to give people the most access to information. And he fundamentally could see that there was something wrong with the current system and the way it was set up, and the roadblocks and the barriers that were there for people who might just want to have better access to knowledge and to use that knowledge to their own benefit and to the benefit of their families and their loved ones. And that was something that, even though when you look at him and you see him speak, again, very kind of maybe shy almost in a way, doesn't seem like some revolutionary figure, but at the same time, what he was fighting for was very revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the peaceful warrior.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're going on the anniversary, as we're going to be releasing this, is 12 years now. And just reflect on that a bit. Like, what do you think has really changed besides, like you mentioned the Brave browser, I mentioned Sci-Hub, a couple of tools like that. But do you think on the whole, and maybe the answer to this is obvious, but your thoughts on, like, has information become more free? Has the desires and the goals of someone like Aaron Swartz been furthered? Or would he, if he were here today, would he be looking around and thinking like, wow, we've actually gone backwards?
Right. I think there's some of both, right? To some degree, there is so much access to a lot of information now, but only for those who are actively looking for it and like kind of know the tools and how to get there. It's not for the average person. There's still totally cut off from that stuff. They hit the paywall and they give up. They don't even think like, oh, I should go check out this thing that lets me get past the the paywall. They don't, so overall, I think you would probably feel kind of like Edward Snowden seems to when we hear from him. That was the next year that he came out and did his whistleblowing, and he said a few times, how disappointed he is that the world has sort of just moved on quickly. And I feel like Aaron might be in the same kind of position. Like, and even it can be almost even more frustrating, maybe, seeing that the tools are there and most people still have the same level of ignorance that they did.
Yeah, I was just sharing this with somebody commenting online earlier. Similar topic, but not totally related. But it was about crypto, and it was essentially the same discussion. This person was saying, well, how are you going to use crypto when the government shuts it down? Or what happens if Binance locks you out, or Coin? Everything they were saying was like all the mainstream avenues of being able to get crypto. And I was sharing this person, I was like, you do know you don't have to use a bank account, right? You don't have to use Coinbase. You don't have to use these mainstream platforms. And to your point that I think maybe Snowden and Aaron Swartz and others might feel that the tools, and I've said this on this channel for a long time, like the tools that are going to help liberate you, empower you, educate you, etc., they're not going to be handed to you like the mainstream news and the mainstream movies and the mainstream music and all that stuff. Like, you have to go out of your way to look for it. And obviously part of that is why people like myself do podcasting and put out information, because we're trying to further that knowledge into the public sphere. So people who are looking to be more free, whether that's free access to knowledge so you can empower yourself, or free money outside of the state's hands, you have to typically go look for it. You got to find the people who are aware of these things. And that's what I think both of us try to do, because I'm not a coder, a technologist, or a developer who's creating these tools. But when I meet people who are doing really brilliant things like this, I want to use them and apply them to my life. But then I also want to shout it from the rooftops and tell people, hey, here's some really cool thing that allows you, to benefit your life in some way. And so I think it's the same thing with the tools that perhaps Aaron Swartz might have gone on to create, and others who have been inspired by him, that we have to just keep getting this information in front of people. Like you mentioned with the Brave browser plugin, the names might change, or it might get taken down. It's the same thing with Sci-Hub. Sci-Hub is they have Sci-Hub a million other different domains, because so many of them have been shut down. And so you might use one for a little while and then it gets shut down. But the people behind it, I believe they've actually directly mentioned Aaron, because their whole mission is like scientific knowledge should be free and it should be accessible to people. And I think actually the person who founded it, the woman who founded it, comes from Russia or Eastern Europe, or she grew up in a communist nation, or her parents did. And so she has this very keen awareness of what happens when the state tries to clamp down on knowledge and prevent the people from accessing it. And that was part of her inspiration, in addition to, I think, being inspired by Aaron, to make sure people could get that info. So you have to be adaptable. You got to be seeking this information. It's not just going to be handed to you. The tools that are going to free you aren't going to be shown to you on the nightly news or on, the mainstream platforms.
Yeah. The front page of Google isn't going to show you how to break out of the matrix, regardless of what search term you put in.
Exactly. So other than paying tribute to Aaron, which, we'll remember him on his anniversary of his passing, of course, and try to remember his life more than anything, and the things that he was fighting for. Again, I'll just emphasize that if you don't know Aaron Swartz, if you're totally new to this topic, go watch The Internet's Own Boy. It's an older documentary now, but you only need to watch that one to get a full understanding of his life and what happened to him. We are now 12 years since that fact, and people like Aaron have continued to be targeted. People who are trying to promote information, promote knowledge. You mentioned Snowden. Obviously, whatever people's feelings or thoughts about Snowden's motivation, information was leaked. He's gone to Russia. His whole life has been, changed and upended. Obviously, around that time as well, we had Ross Ulbricht being arrested for the Silk Road trial. I was there at the trial reporting on it. If you guys have followed for a long time, you've seen me discuss this. And we'll talk about some other friends as well who are being targeted. But clearly, the efforts by the state to go after people who are trying to provide more liberty and in different ways, financially, through education, knowledge, etc. It hasn't stopped in any way, and it's only gotten worse. And we should expect it to continue to get worse. But let's pause for a moment and talk about Ross. For those who, we don't have to recap the entire story, but for those who haven't been keeping up, Ross, of course, was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus. So he's been rotting away in prison for over a decade now. And many people who have been following Ross's plight and got to know his family, like yourself and myself, have tried every avenue that we could to reach people, to raise awareness, from petitions to legal appeals, namely his mom, Lynn Ulbricht, and the family. They've been fighting, every way they could. People donated millions of dollars and tried so many different avenues. And at the end of the day, it seemed like there was just no hope, nothing really left, no other levers to pull to really try to get Ross out of prison, short of breaking him out of prison. And then last May in Washington, D.C., at the Libertarian National Convention, which I was at, which was one of my highlights of 2024, to watch Donald Trump be booed by a lot of people. But of course, Trump was there to try to appeal to the libertarians. And so he was throwing a bone to them and saying, I'm going to put a libertarian in my cabinet if I win. But also he promised to commute Ross's sentence. And I think we should make sure that people understand he didn't say he would pardon Ross. There is a major difference. Maybe you could speak to that, Kenny. But he said he would commute Ross's sentence on day one once elected. Trump has been elected. We're recording this on January 4th. So we're 16 days away from his inauguration. Both you and I are planning to be there at the inauguration in Washington, D.C., and not because we're Trump supporters, obviously, but because we want to see if this man does keep his word. And if on day one, he walks into the White House and signs an executive order commuting Ross's sentence, and that day or the next day, Ross is freed. This is something that so many people are praying for, hoping for, obviously his family. Just speak to us a little bit about that, about the situation with that, the Libertarian Party, and your personal thoughts on whether you believe that people should put faith in Trump's promises.
Yeah. So for the first point, let's just do the commutation versus pardon, because a lot of people do seem to just think they're the same thing or whatever. A commutation means he's commuting the sentence to time served. So Ross gets to come out. His sentence has been served, but the charges stick. He's still a felon on federal crimes, hacking crimes. There's a good chance they won't let him near computers and stuff potentially with that sort of thing. And it hasn't been talked about, but when you have crimes for hacking and wire fraud and that sort of stuff, they often don't let you legally get near tech for a while afterwards too. A pardon, on the other hand, which would be obviously what we'd all love even more, he's free and the charges are gone. Like, he's been pardoned of the crime. The crime is no longer on his record. He can legally own a gun. He can get a passport and leave the country legally, all that sort of stuff. So it's unlikely that's going to happen, just because Trump has never said it. Where on the commutation side, he's said it multiple times now. His son, Don Jr., has said it. A couple other people in the core team there have said that it's going to happen. So, we're not one, I'm not one to trust politicians, obviously, as neither are you, Derrick, and probably most people watching. But in this case, I feel like it's more the businessman angle. Realistically, I feel pretty optimistic, because it seems like Trump had something to offer. One thing, free Ross, and he made deals to a bunch of different people for it, right? He got Thomas Massey to support him largely on that. He got over $100 million in crypto donations because he pitched that, largely because he pitched that. He also talked about other crypto stuff, but we know Bitcoiners in the crypto community at large are the biggest free Ross voice out there, is that community, because most of the Bitcoiners know that they wouldn't have that money if it wasn't for Ross. Like, it would be so many years behind where it is now. But yeah, there's other, all these, plus what we don't know about any private deals and stuff. The LP obviously had conversations and meetings and stuff with them too. So it's like, it seems like he's getting a really good deal, a whole bunch of support, a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of praise, which we know he loves. And probably a lot of people will give him a free ride for the next 4 years if he does this, right? Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, but he freed Ross, which, yeah, he did. Okay, cool. But I think there's a lot of pros for him. And the downside to it is almost nothing. There's been no negative pushback. He made the first promise 7 months ago, more than 7 months ago now. And there hasn't been one mainstream article or one rant on CNN about how, Ross has to stay locked up and it's a terrible, like they just haven't mentioned it, or it's been positive news on the other side. So it seems like there's really almost nothing to lose and plenty to gain, but we're not taking that and just hoping that it'll happen. Obviously we got a lot of stuff going on. You'll be there more in like your journalistic piece at the inauguration, getting video, hopefully some interviews with people and stuff. I'm going mostly to hand out signs, right? So we're going to have the black and white free Ross signs like at the LP convention and the Bitcoin conference. And we got a cool, like I said, a guy who has a bunch of Bitcoin money and he knows that he owes a lot of that wealth to Ross. So he told us he'll fund as much as we need for the signs. And so it's just a matter of how many volunteers I can get out there. If you're in the DC area or going to be out near the inauguration, reach out and, come help hand out signs. We're going to have at least 10, 20,000 of them. And, just trying to keep the volume up and literally keeping the volume up as well. We're dropping the Free Ross compilation album on January 10th is what it's scheduled for right now, which will include your track, Free the Warriors. And there's I think only 4 of the songs on it have been like previously published on streaming platforms and stuff. All the rest is new tracks. There's 13 tracks total right now, various genres, and just all people that want to support Ross. And a lot of them talk about, like we are today, like other folks that have been taken down, other ways that the state is working against innovation and liberty in a lot of ways actively that people don't necessarily know about. So it's a good time to, feel the excitement of very potentially hitting the finish line on this, 11 and a half year battle to get Ross out. And, knowing that we're not there yet, we still got 16 days of, for me, it's like Twitter and Telegram all day, every day, basically, just keeping the volume up and talking to people and getting them to make posts about it and, just keeping it going. And, once he's out, he's just one of many. So it's like, it's a big win and it's just one step. So that's, yeah.
It's I've thought about this a lot, man, because, and for those who have followed my work for a while, probably there's not too many who were back on the channel back in 2015, but I was there at the trial in New York when Ross was sentenced. If you search my name in Silk Road, you'll find a Newsweek article where they say a dreadlocked anarchist shouted Ross is a hero as he was dragged out of the courtroom, which was true. I was there the moment when the judge, hit the gavel and said, she said this whole speech of, she had the American flag behind her. She's like, I'm humbled with the task before me that I have, been put here to make sure that no one dare ever take up your flag again. And because of that, I'm sentencing you so harshly and this and that. And when they handed down the life sentences, it was just like this. I can only imagine what Ross and his family felt like, of course, but to me, it was just like a big kick in the chest, just like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up, like, holy crap. And there was just an involuntary reaction because people start freaking out in the courtroom and they grab Ross right away and just start taking him out. I'm just like, Ross, you're a hero. And like everybody's in tears. And yeah, it was a very emotional moment. It's been an emotional time. And so obviously I want Ross to be freed. And I do not like Donald Trump in any way, but I hope to God that he does actually keep this promise. I am not going to be one of the people who will make excuses for him after that. I will continue to call him out for everything, as I hope everybody else will be. But obviously anything to get Ross free would be good at this point. And, of course, that's just the beginning of the conversation. Like you said, there's more people who are locked up right now, other allies and associates and friends of ours who are facing prison time for their own battles with the state. And then, of course, everybody's like, well, what's Ross going to do next? Like you said, he might not be able to touch a computer at all, but he has a brilliant mind. He's got a story to tell. He's going to become an advocate, I would assume, for these causes. But at the same time, maybe not. We never know. Maybe he'll recede quietly into the background like Julian Assange has so far and just spend time with his family and his friends, and we might not hear from him for a while. Either way, whatever he chooses to do, it's his life, it's his freedom, and we'll all be grateful that he's out of prison, and whatever he wants to do. So all of that remains to be seen, but I just want to heap a lot of praise on you, brother, for all the work and the efforts that you do and have been doing in this particular arena. Let's talk about the album for a minute. Well, first off, so you, like you said, you've been active on Telegram, Twitter and Telegram and elsewhere, everywhere you can. What's the best place for people to follow that specifically if they want to keep up with your pumping of Ross's story and just promoting, all the efforts to hold Trump accountable to his promises?
Yeah. So the project that I've been running for 10, 11 months now is called Free Ross Now. Just, slightly different from the family's website and stuff. But freerossnow.org. On Twitter, it's Free Ross Now, Rumble, things like that as well. Twitter's where we're most active. And we do have, we're hosting a Twitter space every Friday for Free Ross Friday. We're hosting a 24-hour space for the inauguration day itself. Like, we've got a token on Solana called FRN, and largely this is to take the token people, the meme coin people, the crypto people that don't know Ross's story. So many of the people that we interact with are only in for the last couple of years, not really in the liberty movement yet. But as soon as I tell them the story, they want to support. And so having this token element has allowed me to take the activism I do normally and the people I'm connected with and then bring it into this new realm. And I'm on Twitter way too much now. I'm looking forward to Ross getting out just so I can go offline for a couple months. And it's just Free Ross Now everywhere is the easiest way to find it. And it's really been a pleasure, just helping support Lynn. I spoke to Lynn a couple times recently, and one thing she had said is that, currently Ross is planning on becoming a criminal reform advocate, basically just trying to keep nonviolent offenders, victimless crimes out of prison, like
Awesome.
working to end the drug war, like all of that. I hope he'll take some time to just hang out in the woods with his family first, like just get back to earth, get back to people, all of that. But when he does come back, I'm sure it'll be, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, you know what I mean? It'll be like massive interviews. Hopefully he'll have a book to push and he'll just be able to bring his light back to the world in a big way. Yeah, and I don't think it's public yet, so I won't say what, but I will just say that Lynn told me about some plans that her and Martha and a few other people have for continuing their activism once Ross is out too. So
very cool. Yeah, I think that's a good fit for Ross. I mean, I spent way less time than he has spent behind bars, but I do know that, and not even nearly the intense, the sort of maximum security places he's been in. But I know that you spend any time behind bars, you meet all kinds of good people, and you realize like, wow, there's just good people locked up for bullshit reasons everywhere, and it does make you want to try to do something about it. So I can only imagine that as Ross leaves, and the beautiful thing is, for those who aren't on Twitter, Ross does have a Twitter account. He's not the one running it. Obviously, he communicates messages to family and they post it. But you hear him talk about tutoring other prisoners. You hear him talking about meditating. You hear him talking about like touching the grass every once in a while when they're not in shutdown and lockdown and solitary, and trying to just, even within these just most horrendous places and the most dire circumstances where up until maybe the last 8 months, it didn't seem like maybe he ever would get out. He's continued to try to be a light in that space. And I definitely think him coming out and trying, I'm sure as he leaves, he's not going to forget about all the people that are staying in there and that are stuck in there. And I definitely remember that feeling. It's like, there's this, when you're locked up behind bars, it's in some sense, people are grateful. Every time somebody goes home, unless you're just a bitter person, you're grateful, because even if it's not you, you're just like, yes, somebody's getting the heck out of here. Somebody's going back to the real world and getting out of this horrible place. And obviously there's a little bit of sadness that you're still there, but you're grateful that that person gets to leave. And so I'm sure Ross and his friends that he's made in there are having those conversations, and I know that they're cheering him on and hoping that he can come out, and I know he won't forget them and will continue to fight for them. So that would be really beautiful. And for those who are into crypto and everything, I do encourage you to get the Free Ross Now token, because it is just another way to support this movement of people who are trying to raise awareness about this. Tell us a little bit more about the album. As you mentioned, I am going to be on that, my alter ego 33. I'm actually going to play the song at the end of this interview. So if you haven't heard it yet, we'll play the video at the end. But what's the goal of it? Maybe you could name some of the artists who are there. Is this like a way to raise money or just awareness for Ross? Like, what's the focus there?
Yeah. So the album is one, it's just like a passion project for me. I've been, supporting and promoting and helping, build up my musician friends for well over a decade, and haven't ever like been pushing out a project of any kind. So that was really cool to just kind of piece this together. And it's mostly about the narrative, getting it out there, making noise, getting a whole bunch of songs. A few of them are called Free Ross, a bunch of them are called Silk. Like, as these terms are getting searched, there'll be a whole bunch of brand new songs or re-release songs that are now on, Bandcamp, Spotify, etc., and hopefully get a bunch of people that wouldn't know the story otherwise to hear it and throw their support behind it, even if it's just, mentally, like emotionally. It'll be a free album on Bandcamp, like free with donation, and then all the donations will just go to Ross once he gets out, or some whatever cause if he doesn't want them. He hasn't really made any statements one way or the other, how much money he's going to accept from people versus just try to not even, for all we know, he might still have a bunch of Bitcoin tucked away too. Like, who knows? I hope he does. I hope one of those Satoshi wallets that nobody knows about is actually Ross's. Like, that would be great. Anyway, the album, so it's got a bunch of friends of ours. It's got Tatiana Morose's song "The Silk Road," which is like the oldest one about Ross. She dropped it like 11 years ago already. Jordan Page's song "Free Ross" that came out back in July. We've got Illuminati Congo's song. We've got a couple being worked on, like final touches right now, including one with our good friend Presence. And High Res, the rapper. You might know High Res from his song "Welcome to the Revolution" that like blew up in 2020. Really big one. He's got like 2.5 million followers on YouTube. So it's like this album and these songs coming out could like really crank the volume up on this Free Ross message. Right at this key moment, right at the end, when all we need to do, like Trump already won, all we need is for him to remember to do it, to feel like there's enough positive pressure to outweigh any pushback he's getting to make it a thing. So, and we're going to do some physical copies too, pretty limited to start, just like a couple hundred of them that I'll bring down to Morelia and pass out there at the People's Reset, but mostly it'll just be all the digital.
Very cool. And is the best place to follow about the album too going to be the Free Ross Now channels? If people want to make sure they get a copy or they can listen to it. I mean, I know you mentioned to me earlier before we recorded that you're using, the usual digital platforms, so it will be available all the usual places people look for music. Yeah.
It's going out through DistroKid, so it'll be on Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon Music, and YouTube. And so you'll be able to find it pretty easy. But yeah, we'll be pushing it a bunch from all of our socials, and it'll be like put up at the top of our website too. So if you just check back on any of the Free Ross Now pages, you'll see it there as soon as it goes live for sure.
Very cool. And I'll definitely be promoting that and pumping that. So I'm sure if you guys are following, you'll hear more here. And I think that's a great plan, man. It's a good strategy for, like you said, right as the push of, okay, Trump's coming into office, whatever we feel about that, it's what's happening. So let's take advantage of it and try to hold his feet to the fire. I think it's a great idea to be there at the inauguration with as many Free Ross signs as possible. If we do have friends in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, if you're planning on going or if you're not planning on going, but you want to help out, as I said, I'll be there in person. I will be documenting, doing some interviews, talking to people about Ross and just, obviously what they think about the inauguration and doing our part to continue to raise awareness. So I think this is just, it's a good moment for people to jump in. And if you don't know Ross's story, go visit freeross.org, go visit, the different websites, because there's a lot of propaganda you're going to come across. I'm sure there's going to be at least one comment saying, well, didn't he hire an assassin, to hitman to try to kill somebody? Those claims have long been debunked. If you haven't seen my reporting, you can go back years ago and see my articles I wrote for Mint Press News and the interviews I did on RT and everywhere else, debunking all those claims. The family's website has a lot of great resources that can get you caught up to speed. Because at the end of the day, what matters is that a freedom warrior, somebody who did care about the liberty for all people and was trying to really attack the Federal Reserve System ultimately through Bitcoin and through the creation of the Silk Road and just their beliefs, has been locked up, and their family has been suffering. They have been suffering. It's been over a decade. It's well beyond the time that Ross comes home. So I think this is just a really crucial effort, and I hope more of you out there will learn about Ross and join. It's not too late to join the movement to help him get freed. So I really appreciate that, Kenny, and all the time and energy you're putting into that. Is there anything else you want to mention as far as, I know we've alluded to other people that we know, like there's Roger Ver, who I mentioned in my song, and some other people. Obviously, we're pretty like heavily focused on Ross right now. This is his moment to get him out. But like you said earlier, there's more fights to be fought. Is there anything else you want to mention in terms of that?
Yeah. Just, if you don't know about these folks, if you haven't heard that this is happening, if you aren't familiar with like Free Ian, for Ian Freeman, or the guys that run Samurai Wallet, or the Tornado Cash case, and what's happening to Roman. Roger Ver, like we said, he's looking at the rest of his life in prison as well, potentially. If you haven't looked into this, just know that it's a broad spectrum thing. Like there's a lot of attacks happening to largely people building things for privacy, building things for, for sovereignty to gain strength amongst the people of the world. And it's important to know about this stuff so that you can have a realistic view of the world and what's going down, and you can support the people who need it, and to know that it's not like, it doesn't mean that they won and they're just rounding everybody up and stuff. Obviously, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You wouldn't see us if that was the case, right? Like, we would long have had mysterious deaths. Like, it's clearly they can't just apply that pressure everywhere all the time, because I think the world would wake up like instantly if they tried doing that. The pushback would be too quick. But yeah, right now, just get out there and do whatever you can to not be feeding and supporting that system. With your tax money, with your money in the bank, like anything you can do to take your time, money, energy, your attention away from that system and those entities, those parasitic structures that want to just drain humans for money and power and profit and control, and put them into things that empower you and your family and your community. It doesn't really matter what the rest of the world is doing. You're going to be better off, and the people around you are going to be better off.
Beautifully said. And yeah, I know I've mentioned some of these names and cases in past reports, but for those who aren't familiar, I will be covering more of that in the coming future as it progresses. I'm actually going to be doing an interview with Roger very soon. And he probably won't be speaking, but he's going to be there with his attorney doing an interview. You may have seen him, some of you out there, on Tucker Carlson recently and things of that sort. As you mentioned, the Tornado Cash guys, Samurai Wallet. The key element that you were touching on there, Kenny, and I know there's still a lot of my audience that is heavily crypto skeptical, and you should be skeptical of Bitcoin for sure. But the fact is that these people who are being targeted are people who, as you said, Kenny, are focused on privacy. The Samurai Wallet, Tornado Cash, who are trying to make it easy for people to transact money and to exchange and to communicate and trade value without governments, without banks, without taxes, in a private way. And that is what they are terrified of. So, they're not just... I had somebody saying this morning, well, if crypto was a danger, they wouldn't just be letting it exist. It's like, well, I guess you haven't heard about Samurai Wallet, Roger, Tornado Cash, Ross, et cetera, et cetera. The fact is, just because you don't hear about these things in the mainstream, doesn't mean people aren't being targeted. People are being targeted. Their livelihoods are under threat. They're being held hostage. It's costing them money, time, their lives, et cetera. So I think that's a sign that it is a threat, and that the governments of the world truly do not want us to be able to interact and to trade without them having their dirty little hands in it. And so that's why we should support those who are brave enough to make those efforts to try to create new tools that can allow us to exist outside of their hands. And unfortunately, occasionally people do get arrested and they get charged with crimes, and they have to take a stand. And if we don't stand with them, then, well, these potential solutions don't really stand any chance of ever surviving into the future. So really appreciate your time today, brother. Anything else you want to wrap up with before we go for today?
No, I mean, I think it feels pretty good. We covered a good little bit there, and just that reminder that, just because you're becoming aware of the negative things in the world and the darkness in the world doesn't mean that there's necessarily more of it, right? The darkness has just been coming to light so much more over the past decades because of information being able to flow more freely. I'm still pretty optimistic myself. Having gone down most all the rabbit holes, I still feel like the human race is heading in a great direction in the long term. I don't know what the next couple of years will be. It'll probably be crazy. They're usually crazy, but 50 years, 100 years, 200 years out, I think things are going to keep getting better for most people on most of the planet, if not everybody everywhere, as they in most ways have over the last few centuries. And I'm glad to be here, being part of it. And when it comes to these people, the idea that they're going to push back and they're going to come and round people up and stuff, like I feel good knowing that, it feels good knowing that there's going to be people that are going to come to the support of those folks as well. For any one of these people that we named and ones that we haven't and ones that have already passed, like Aaron, like there were movements, there is a movement for each of them. There's always people that are like, no, I'm going to take that up and I'm going to hold that banner until we get you out, or at least get, whatever. Like it's beautiful to see that humans come together to support when it's needed like that. And that's always the best part of these stories is seeing the human power through that love and support that comes through.
Absolutely. And if you guys, again, if you're not familiar with Aaron Swartz, look up his story. If you're not familiar with Ross Ulbricht, look up his story. Roger Ver, Ian Freeman, Tornado Cash, Samurai Wallet, and like you said, many others. And I hope if they ever target me or you, that there's a movement behind us to support us and stand with us. That's all that we can really pray for, is that if you're in that situation, you're in a cage, that you just know that you're not fighting it alone. That's because I know that can be a very lonely, lonely place. So thanks, Kenny, for joining us today. Everybody do go to check out the Free Ross Now movement, both the token, but also just the work that Kenny's doing. I encourage you to pick up the album if you can get a physical copy, but for sure listen to the digital album when it comes out. And if you can make it to DC, if you plan to be in DC and you want to help with the Free Ross Now efforts, that I encourage you to reach out to me or reach out to Kenny directly. And thank you guys so much for being with us. We're going to continue to fight for freedom in all the avenues and all the ways we can until we see a free humanity. So as always, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.
Ooh.
Enjoy my song, Free the Warriors. We'll see you next time.
It's time to free the warriors, my friends. We got too many people locked up by the state, and they're counting on us to use our voices.
Look, I don't mean to offend, I love all of humanity. Even those who can't see their own chains, we still family. But what do you call a society that accepts sickness? And what do you call a system that locks someone away with no witness? Like, have you ever heard of a man named Ross Ulbricht? A brilliant young dude locked up for life, but he still exists. They call him a kingpin, a drug lord, be afraid, very afraid. But they pass the propaganda, the lies and the shade. And there's a very different story waiting to be told. A bill of fake goods, to the public it was sold. It's more than 10 years now, with Ross locked up. They thought we lost hope, but the movement's building up.
Yo, we're just getting started. Yo, it's time to free Ross, free Julian Assange, free Daniel Hale, free all the heroes, all the warriors, and all the whistleblowers. Let's do it.
Someone once told me that there's a war on for your mind. You gotta guard your heart and protect your spine. They keep trying to convince us that we are divine. Repeat what we say and don't you dare step out of line. Generations upon generations taught to doubt themselves, never chasing their dreams, left their hope up on the shelf. It's time to come together, what's mine is yours. Can't believe they locking up all our warriors, the ones who use their minds and their voices to inspire. Their creative genius was the spark that lit a fire in the hearts and minds of the free-thinking people. Bit by bit we wake them up, yeah, no more sheeple. Well, despite what they say, Ross is still a hero. We give thanks for his effort, and we hope he knows. We're praying for the day that we see you go free. And now you might ask, of exactly what is he guilty? Well, he created a space, a place for people to be free, to exchange what they want, a celebration of liberty. No governments, no banks, just free people living in bliss. This state hates competition, and we can guarantee this. They water down our history and poison all the food. Men looking at the future got me in some type of mood. They won't stop coming until we finally stand up. And I'm not talking about violence, but I am saying disrupt. Business as usual must not proceed. We need our people to stand strong as we plant the seeds. It's time to come together. What's mine is yours. Can't believe they locking up all our warriors.
Free Ross, free Roger Ver, free Leonard Peltier, free Julian Assange, free Daniel Hale, and free all the future victims of government violence. 33. Out.